My mother demanded me $50,000 for my sister's wedding. She called me selfish. When I refused, she kicked me out from family in front of everyone. I say nothing, and then the gate opened and some enter with papers. He announced the new homeowner, and everyone shocked because it was... This is a story about a mother who saw me as a checking account instead of a daughter, and a sister who never once said thank you. If you've ever been the family ATM, the one who pays and never gets so much as a hug in return, hit subscribe right now, because what happens next is the kind of karma you wait your whole life to see. My name is Olivia Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and 3 weeks before this nightmare started, I thought I had a normal, if slightly exhausting family. I run a small but profitable consulting firm out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had just closed the best quarter of my career. My sister Brooke is 29, recently engaged to a guy named Connor Pierce, and apparently engaged to the idea that I exist solely to fund her happiness. The first time I heard the number $50,000, I was sitting in my mother's kitchen eating leftover lasagna, and she said it the way other people say, "Pass the salt." "Olivia, sweetheart, I booked the Wentworth estate for Brooke's wedding. It's perfect, and the deposit is due Friday." I remember putting my fork down very slowly. "You booked it. With what money?" She didn't even blink. "With your money, obviously. You don't have a husband, you don't have kids, you don't have anyone else to spend it on." I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking. She was not joking. "Mom, that's $50,000 for one day. For a party." "It's not a party, Olivia, it's your sister's wedding, and family helps family. Family also asks before they sign a contract in someone else's name." That's when she told me the part that made my stomach drop. "I didn't sign it in my name, honey. I told them you'd be the responsible party. They needed a name with good credit." I sat there in silence for what felt like a full minute, staring at a woman who had just informed me, mid-bite of lasagna, that she had volunteered my identity to a luxury event venue without asking me a single question. "You used my name? On a legal contract, without telling me." "It's not a big deal, you'll pay it anyway." "I will not be paying it anyway because I never agreed to this in the first place." My mother's face did the thing it always does when she doesn't get her way, that flash of disbelief, like the rules of the universe had personally betrayed her. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat your sister?" I almost asked what, exactly, they had done for me, but I already knew the answer would be a list of things that happened 20 years ago and somehow still counted as currency today. Brooke walked in right then, scrolling through her phone, not even looking up. "Did you tell her about the centerpieces too? They're an extra $4,000. I looked at my sister, the golden child. The one who never had a part-time job because school was stressful enough. The one who got a brand new car at 16 while I drove our grandmother's 12-year-old Buick because I was more mature and didn't need flashy things. "Brooke, I haven't agreed to pay for any of this." She finally looked up. "Why are you being so dramatic? You make good money. It's literally one wedding." "It's $54,000, Brooke." "That's not one wedding. That's a down payment on a house." "Well, some of us actually want a life instead of just working all the time like a robot." There it was, the line that had been thrown at me since I was 19 years old, and the only one in my family who understood what a budget was. My mother crossed her arms. "If you don't help your sister with this, after everything, then maybe you need to think about what kind of daughter you want to be in this family." I felt that sentence land somewhere deep in my chest, the same place it always landed, the place that had been absorbing little cuts like this since I was a kid. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Family takes care of family. Family also doesn't forge my name on contracts and then call me selfish for being upset about it. My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped against the tile floor. "You watch your tone with me." "I'm not raising my tone, Mom. I'm telling you the truth, and you don't like hearing it. If you walk out of this kitchen without agreeing to help, don't expect to be welcome at this wedding or at this family going forward." I want you to sit with that for a second because I had to. My own mother just told me that my place in our family was conditional on whether I handed over $50,000 I never agreed to spend. I grabbed my purse and I left without saying another word because if I had opened my mouth again, I think I would have said something I couldn't take back, and honestly, I needed time to think clearly, not emotionally. Let me back up for a second. Because you need to understand exactly how long this pattern had been running before it finally hit its boiling point. Growing up, money in our house flowed in exactly one direction, away from me and toward Brooke. When I was 15, I got a part-time job at a grocery store, because if I wanted new clothes, or a yearbook, or a school trip, I had to pay for it myself. Brooke, at the same age, got an allowance, a credit card for emergencies, and a closet full of clothes my mother bought because she's still growing, she needs things. When I turned 18, my mother sat me down and explained, very seriously, that I was the responsible one, which I later understood was code for the one we don't have to spend money on, because she figured it out herself. Brooke was the sensitive one, which was code for the one we will never say no to because tears work. I'd put myself through college with loans, a job, and a scholarship I fought hard for. Brooke had 2 years of college paid for in full, dropped out, and nobody in my family ever once brought it up as a problem. When I started my consulting business 5 years ago, my mother's first reaction was, "That sounds risky. Are you sure you can support yourself?" When Brooke announced she was quitting her receptionist job to find herself through a 6-month trip to Europe, my mother threw her a going-away party. I paid for half the catering at that party, by the way, because you have more disposable income than the rest of us. I tell you all of this not to make you feel sorry for me, but so you understand that the $50,000 wedding demand wasn't an isolated incident. It was the natural endpoint of a system that had been quietly built for 15 years. I was always the safety net, and nobody ever asked if the net wanted to be a net. That night, after I left my mother's house, I sat in my car in my own driveway for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I called my best friend, Maya, who has known me since college and has heard every version of this family story for over a decade. She did what? She put my name on a $50,000 venue contract without asking me. Olivia, that's not just rude, that might actually be illegal, depending on how she did it. That sentence stuck with me. I hadn't even thought about the legal angle yet. I was too busy being hurt. But the moment Maya said it out loud, something in me shifted from wounded to focused. What do you mean, illegal? I mean, if she signed your name, or represented herself as having authority to use your credit, without your consent, that's not a family disagreement anymore. That's potentially fraud. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the conversation in the kitchen. The casual way my mother said, "I told them you'd be the responsible party." Like she was describing a minor scheduling adjustment instead of a financial liability she'd strapped to my back without permission. The next morning, I called the venue myself, because I needed to know exactly what my mother had actually done. A woman named Sandra Ferris answered, the event coordinator at the Wentworth estate. "Hi Sandra, this is Olivia Hayes, I believe my mother, Diane Hayes. Recently booked an event with you for my sister's wedding, and I wanted to clarify some details on the contract." "Of course, let me pull that up." Yes, here it is, the Hayes-Pierce wedding, booked for September. The deposit invoice is under your name, Olivia Hayes, listed as the responsible party for payment. Can you tell me who signed the contract? Your mother signed on your behalf. She indicated she had been authorized to do so. There it was, confirmed in plain language. Sandra, I want to be very clear with you. I did not authorize my mother to sign anything on my behalf, and I did not agree to be financially responsible for this event. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, that's a problem on our end then. We'll need to revisit the contract terms. I understand, and I'm not upset with you. This isn't your fault. I just need you to know the truth of the situation. Sandra was polite, professional, and clearly uncomfortable, the way people get when they realize they're standing in the middle of someone else's family explosion. Before we hung up, she said something that I didn't think much of at the time, but that became the single most important sentence in this entire story. Honestly, between us, things have been a little chaotic here lately on the ownership side, so please bear with us if there are any delays in getting this sorted. I thanked her, hung up, and went about my day, not realizing that one offhand comment was the loose thread that would unravel everything. Over the next few days, the calls and texts from my mother and Brooke escalated from guilt trips to outright threats. My mother texted me a paragraph about how disappointed she was, how I was choosing money over family, and how I would regret this when I'm old and alone with no one to call. Brooke sent a single text that read, "I can't believe you're ruining my wedding over money you don't even need." I didn't respond to either of them for 2 full days, which apparently was unacceptable, because my mother showed up at my office unannounced. "You're avoiding us." I'm thinking, Mom, there's a difference. There's nothing to think about. You either help your sister or you don't. It's that simple. It's not simple because you committed financial fraud using my identity, and I'm trying to figure out how serious that actually is. My mother's face went pale, then red, in about 3 seconds flat. Fraud. Olivia, don't be so dramatic. I'm your mother. Being my mother doesn't give you legal authority over my finances. After I raised you, after everything I sacrificed, you're going to lawyer up against your own mother over a wedding venue. I'm not lawyering up against you. I'm protecting myself from a debt I never agreed to. She stood up, smoothed her blazer, and delivered the line that, looking back, was the real turning point of this entire story, the moment the second betrayal cracked open and showed me exactly how far they were willing to go. Well, it's a little late for that, sweetheart, because the deposit's already been paid. Using the line of credit the venue extended based on your information. And if you don't keep up the payments, it's going to hurt your credit, not mine. I felt the floor tilt slightly under my chair. Say that again. The venue offered an in-house financing option for the deposit. Since the wedding is in 9 months, and I signed you up for it since you have such good credit, it's already active. My own mother had not only put my name on a venue contract, she had taken out an actual financed line of credit in my name, attached to my social security number, which she had access to from years of helping me with old tax paperwork without my knowledge or consent. This wasn't a guilt trip anymore. This was identity-based financial fraud, dressed up in a cardigan and calling itself motherly love. I sat completely still for a moment because I needed her to keep talking. I needed to understand the full scope of what she had done before I said another word. How much is the financing for? Just the deposit portion, $12,000. The rest you'd pay later, in installments, which is actually generous of them. And if I don't pay it? Then it defaults, and it's your credit that takes the hit, not mine, since it's in your name. She said this like it was a clever solution, like she had outsmarted the situation in my favor, rather than admitting she had committed a serious financial crime against her own daughter to fund a party. Mom, you need to leave my office now. Olivia, I said leave. I need to make some calls. She left, muttering something about ungrateful children, and I sat there shaking, not from sadness this time, but from a cold, clear kind of anger I had never fully felt before. This was the lowest point. Not the moment she demanded $50,000. That was insulting but survivable. This was the moment I realized my own mother saw my identity, my credit, my financial safety as just another resource to extract. The same way she'd extracted my time, my money, and my emotional labor for 15 years. I went home that night and I didn't cry, which surprised me. I just sat on my couch in the dark for almost an hour, replaying every birthday where Brooke got the bigger gift. Every holiday where my accomplishments got a nod while hers got a toast. Every time I was told to be the bigger person, while she got to be the baby of the family forever. I thought about calling my father, but he passed away 6 years ago, and honestly, even when he was alive, he rarely stepped in when my mother was like this. He just let her run the household the way she wanted. I thought about just paying the $12,000 and walking away from the whole situation, just to make it stop. For about 10 minutes, I genuinely considered it. Then I thought about the next wedding or the next family emergency, or the next time my name would be used as a financial tool without my permission. Because if I paid this one quietly, there would always be a next time. I picked up my phone and called the one person who could actually tell me how bad this was, legally speaking. A contract attorney named Patricia Voss, who had handled some business contracts for my consulting firm in the past. Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I explained everything, the venue contract, the financing line, the social security number, all of it. There was a long pause on her end. Olivia, what your mother did is serious. Signing a contract on your behalf without authorization is one thing. That's a civil issue around apparent authority and fraud. But opening a finance line of credit using your social security number without your consent? That crosses into identity theft territory, which is a criminal matter in most states, including North Carolina. I don't want to send my mother to prison, Patricia. I just want this to stop, and I want to never be put in this position again. That's completely fair, and you don't have to pursue criminal charges to protect yourself. The first thing we need to do is dispute that financing line immediately, in writing, and get it removed from any credit reporting before it does damage. The second thing, frankly, is that you should know your full leverage here, because right now you're playing defense and you don't need to be. What do you mean, leverage? I mean, this venue clearly has loose internal controls if they let someone other than the named party sign and finance a contract this large. That tells me they might be a business under stress. Businesses under financial stress make mistakes like this because they're desperate for deposits. I want to know more about who actually owns that venue and what kind of shape they're really in. That single conversation changed the entire direction of this story. I hung up with Patricia, and the offhand comment from Sandra, the venue coordinator, came rushing back into my mind. Things have been a little chaotic here lately on the ownership side. I am, by profession, someone who reads businesses for a living. That's literally what my consulting firm does. We go into struggling companies and figure out what's broken. So instead of panicking, I did what I do best. I started digging. The next morning, I called an old college friend named Derek Lynn, who works as a commercial real estate broker here in Charlotte and specializes in event venues and hospitality properties. Derek, random question, but does the name Wentworth Estate mean anything to you? There was a beat of silence, and then he laughed, not a happy laugh, more of a knowing one. Olivia, that place is a mess. The owner, Richard Wentworth, way over-leveraged the property about 3 years ago. Did a huge renovation, took out a second mortgage to fund it, and then the wedding industry slowed down right after. He's been bleeding money for almost 2 years. How bad is bad? Bad enough that the note holder on his second mortgage has reportedly been trying to offload the debt privately for months, because Wentworth has missed multiple payments, and they don't want the headache of foreclosing themselves. If someone bought that note at the right price, they'd basically control the venue's fate. Because if Wentworth defaults again, the note holder can force a foreclosure sale or negotiate terms directly. I felt something settle into place in my chest, cold and clear, like a plan forming itself before I had even consciously decided to make one. Derek, how would someone go about buying a distressed mortgage note like that? Why, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I'm thinking my mother forged a $50,000 contract in my name at a venue that is apparently one missed payment away from collapse. And I happen to have both the means and the professional background to be very, very interested in that mortgage note. Derek went quiet for a second, then said, Olivia, I love you, but that is the most savage thing I've ever heard, and I am completely in. Over the next 2 weeks, while my mother and Brooke continued texting me passive-aggressive updates about flowers and seating charts, assuming I was either going to comply or quietly disappear from the wedding altogether, I was doing something very different behind the scenes. First, Patricia helped me file a formal dispute with the financing company, providing documentation that I had never authorized the line of credit, which froze the account and protected my credit immediately. Second, I set up a separate holding LLC, something I had actually already been planning to do for an unrelated investment property. But the timing now felt almost poetic, called Hayes Ridge Holdings. Third, Derek connected me with the firm that held the distressed second mortgage note on the Wentworth estate, a private lending group looking to get this asset off their books quietly, without the public embarrassment of a foreclosure notice in the local paper. The note had an outstanding balance of just under $300,000, but because the lender wanted out fast and quietly, they were willing to sell the note at a meaningful discount to a buyer who could close quickly and in cash. I want to be clear here, this was not an impulsive emotional decision. I ran the numbers like I would for any client. The property itself, even with Wentworth's mismanagement, was worth significantly more than the note balance. The location was excellent. The building was beautiful, and event venues in our area were actually in high demand again as the market recovered. In other words, this wasn't just revenge. It was genuinely a smart business. Acquisition that happened to also hand me an enormous amount of leverage over the people trying to humiliate me into paying for a wedding I never agreed to fund. Patricia structured the deal so that Hayes Ridge Holdings would purchase the note directly, which meant I, through my company, would step into the position of the secured lender on Richard Wentworth's mortgage. This is the part I want you to really sit with, because it's the heart of the entire turning point. I wasn't buying the building outright, not yet. I was buying the debt that controlled the building's fate. Once the note was assigned to my LLC, I would have the legal right to enforce its terms, including the right to call the loan or pursue foreclosure if Wentworth was in default, which, according to the documentation Derek obtained, he very much was. While all of this was happening in the background, completely invisible to my mother and sister, life on the surface looked deceptively normal. My mother called almost daily, alternating between guilt and threats. The final walkthrough is in 3 weeks, Olivia. Are you going to be a part of this family or not? I'm thinking about it, Mom. What is there to think about? Just pay the man and let's move on. I'm still considering my options. She had no idea how literally true that sentence was. Brooke sent me a screenshot of the final floor plan, with seating arrangements and a note that read, BTW, you're not at the head table since you're not contributing financially the way you should be. Hope that's okay. I stared at that message for a long time. Not at the head table. After everything? After every dollar I had quietly handed over for 15 years of birthdays and emergencies, and just this once requests. I wasn't even allowed to sit near the front of a wedding my own identity was being used to finance. I didn't respond to that text either. I just saved the screenshot because Patricia had advised me to document absolutely everything, every text, every email, every financial document, in case I ever needed it. 2 weeks before the deal on the note was set to close, my mother invited me to what she called a final tasting and walkthrough at the venue, framed as a peace offering, an opportunity for me to see how beautiful it's going to be, and presumably feel guilty enough to finally open my wallet. I said yes immediately because the timing could not have been more perfect. The closing on the mortgage note was scheduled for 3 days before that walkthrough. For the first time in this entire ordeal, I actually felt something close to excitement, the quiet, focused kind of excitement you feel right before a plan you've built carefully finally clicks into place. The closing happened on a Tuesday afternoon, in Patricia's office, over video call with the private lending group's attorney. It took less than 40 minutes. Hayes Ridge Holdings LLC became the legal holder of the second mortgage note on the Wentworth estate, with an outstanding balance just under $300,000, secured against a property worth considerably more, and a borrower, Richard Wentworth, who was already 2 payments behind. Patricia looked at me after we signed the final documents and said, "You understand that as the note holder, you can issue a formal notice of default and begin foreclosure proceedings whenever you choose, given his payment history." I understand. You also understand that you don't have to do anything dramatic. You could just quietly collect interest payments and let the venue run as normal. I smiled, probably the first real smile I'd had in weeks. Patricia, I didn't buy this note to collect interest payments quietly. She laughed, shook her head, and said, "Then let's talk about timing." That same week, I reached out directly to Richard Wentworth, not as Olivia Hayes, daughter and family ATM, but as the managing member of Hayes Ridge Holdings, the new holder of his defaulted second mortgage. I requested a meeting which, given his payment history, he could not really refuse. When I walked into his office, I watched his face shift from polite confusion to genuine alarm as Patricia laid out, in calm legal language, exactly how far behind he was and exactly what rights my LLC now held as a result. "Mr. Wentworth, I want to be straightforward with you because I don't think dragging this out benefits either of us. You're significantly behind on this note, and we have the legal standing to begin foreclosure immediately." He looked like a man who had been bracing for this conversation for months and was somehow still not ready for it. What? What would you want to not do that? A few things. First, I want full transparency on every booking currently scheduled at the venue for the next 12 months. Second, I want decision-making input on any contract over $20,000 going forward, as a condition of forbearance on the note. And third, I want you to be honest with me about something specific, a recent contract under the name Hayes Pierce, a wedding booking, financed in part through your in-house program. Richard's face went through several emotions very quickly: recognition, embarrassment, and then something close to dread. That booking, yes, I remember it. There was some issue, the coordinator flagged it to me. Something about the named responsible party disputing the financing. That responsible party is me. Olivia Hayes, the same Olivia Hayes who now owns the debt on your building. There was a long, heavy silence in that office. You're telling me the woman whose identity was used without authorization for a deposit at my venue is the same person who just bought my mortgage note? I'm telling you exactly that, Mr. Wentworth. And I think you can understand why I have a very personal interest in how that particular contract gets resolved. He actually laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh, and rubbed his face with both hands. This is either the worst week of my professional life, or the most poetic. I genuinely cannot decide. It can be neither, if you work with me instead of against me. I'm not here to bury your business, Mr. Wentworth. I'm here to fix a financial mess, and your venue happens to be sitting at the intersection of two messes that need fixing. We spent the next hour going over his books, his upcoming events calendar, and yes, the specifics of the Hayes Pierce contract, which once flagged through compliance, his own legal team confirmed, should never have been processed in the first place, given the lack of verified authorization from the named responsible party, meaning me. By the time I left his office, two things had happened. First, Richard Wentworth had formally voided the financing line tied to my identity, in writing with confirmation sent to the credit bureau, fully clearing my name of any liability. Second, as a condition of my forbearance on his defaulted note, I now had direct input on any contract changes at the venue going forward, including, very specifically, the Hayes Pierce wedding booking still sitting on the books for September. I had not yet decided exactly what I was going to do with that information. But I knew the walkthrough, the one my mother had invited me to as a guilt trip peace offering, was now happening on a stage I quietly owned the foundation of. The day of the walkthrough arrived, bright and sunny, the kind of perfect afternoon Brooke had probably imagined for her actual wedding day. I dressed carefully, professional but understated, because I needed to look like a normal daughter showing up to support her family, not like a woman about to detonate a financial bomb in the middle of a tasting menu. My mother greeted me at the entrance of the Wentworth estate with a hug that felt more like a performance than an apology. "I'm so glad you came, sweetheart. I knew you'd come around." Brooke was already inside, standing near a sample table set with white linens and gold accents, going over floral arrangements with Connor and the event coordinator, Sandra. "Olivia, hi, glad you could finally show some support," Brooke said, not looking up from her phone. I smiled, and I genuinely meant it, because I knew something none of them did yet. I wanted to be here for this part. We walked through the venue, Sandra pointing out the newly renovated ballroom, the outdoor garden ceremony space, the bridal suite, my mother narrating every detail with the enthusiasm of someone who still believed she had won this particular battle. "And this, Olivia, this is where you'll be sitting, near the back, since you're not part of the wedding party financially, but we still wanted you here." Near the back. After 15 years of being the family's financial backbone, I had been assigned a seat near the back of a wedding funded, in part by a fraudulent line of credit opened in my name. I let her finish the tour. I let Brooke complain about the cost of the floral centerpieces. I let Connor make a joke about how lucky Brooke was to have such a generous family. And then, as we settled at the tasting table with sample plates of filet mignon and stuffed chicken in front of us, I asked Sandra a simple question loud enough for my mother and sister to hear clearly. "Sandra, before we go further, can you confirm the current status of the financing line associated with this booking?" Sandra glanced at me, then carefully at her tablet, clearly aware of exactly what was about to happen, since she had been part of the compliance conversation with Richard earlier that week. "Of course. As of this Monday, the financing line previously associated with the Hayes Pierce booking has been formally voided due to lack of authorized consent from the named responsible party." My mother set down her fork. "What does that mean, voided?" "It means," I said very calmly, "that the $12,000 deposit financing you took out in my name, without my permission, no longer exists. I'm fully cleared of any liability. Olivia, what did you do? I disputed identity theft, Mom. That's what you do when someone uses your social security number without consent. Brooke's face had gone pale. Wait, so does that mean the deposit isn't paid anymore? Is our date in jeopardy? This was the moment. I took a slow breath, looked at Sandra and nodded. Sandra stood, smoothed her dress, and spoke clearly, the way Patricia and I had carefully rehearsed with her because legally this part needed to be precise and unambiguous. There's actually something else the family should be aware of. As of this week, ownership control over key decisions at this venue, including event approvals and contract terms, has shifted due to a change in the property's lending structure. Going forward, any major contract decision requires sign-off from the venue's primary lien holder. My mother frowned, completely lost. What does a lien holder have to do with my daughter's wedding? I set down my own fork, and I let the silence stretch just long enough for everyone at that table to feel uncomfortable. Because I'm the lien holder, Mom. The color drained out of her face so fast it was almost comical, if it hadn't been the most satisfying moment of my entire adult life. That doesn't make sense. You're being ridiculous. My company, Hayes Ridge Holdings, purchased the defaulted second mortgage note on this property 2 weeks ago. Which means, as of right now, I have direct legal input into any contract changes here, including this one. Brooke actually laughed, the nervous, disbelieving kind of laugh. You're joking. You don't have that kind of money. I have exactly that kind of money, Brooke. The same money you've all spent the last 15 years, assuming was unlimited, and always available to bail out whatever you needed. Connor, to his credit, was the first one to ask the actual important question. Wait, so are you saying you could cancel this booking if you wanted to? I'm saying I already have. The table went completely silent. I spoke with Richard Wentworth 3 days ago, and as a condition of the forbearance agreement on his defaulted note, the Hayes Pierce booking has been removed from the venue's calendar, effective immediately, due to the fraudulent nature of the original deposit and the venue's own compliance failure in processing it without verifying authorization. My mother stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped backward. You can't do this. This is Brooke's wedding. I'm not stopping Brooke's wedding. Mom, I'm refusing to let it happen using money stolen from my identity. At a venue I now have legal control over. For a family that told me 3 weeks ago I wasn't even good enough to sit at the head table. Brooke's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of guilt, not yet. They were tears of someone realizing, for the first time in her life, that the safety net she'd never had to think about had quietly disappeared. How could you do this to me? I didn't do this to you, Brooke. Mom did this, the moment she decided it was acceptable to forge financial documents in my name to fund your party. I'm just the one who happened to have the skill set to fix it permanently instead of quietly absorbing it, the way I've absorbed everything else for 15 years. Sandra, ever professional, gently added, for what it's worth, the venue is genuinely sorry for the lapse in our verification process, and we'd be happy to discuss alternative arrangements for the family, separate from this particular contract. My mother turned on Sandra first, then back to me, practically shaking with fury and humiliation. You humiliated us. In front of strangers. Over money. No, Mom. You humiliated yourselves. The day you decided my identity was a resource to be used without asking. I just made sure there were consequences this time, instead of letting it disappear into another favor nobody ever acknowledges. I want to pause the story here for a second, because I know some of you watching this are wondering if I felt guilty in that moment. Watching my mother's face crumble and my sister cry at a tasting table surrounded by uneaten filet mignon. I didn't. I felt something closer to relief, the specific kind of relief that comes after years of holding your breath, finally exhaling. My mother gathered her purse, told Brooke they were leaving, and as she walked past me she said one final thing, quiet enough that only I could hear it. You'll regret this, Olivia. Family doesn't do this to family. No, Mom. Family doesn't steal an identity to pay for a party either. We're just finally even. She left. Brooke followed, still crying, Connor trailing behind her, clearly trying to process the fact that the woman he was about to marry into had spent her entire adult life being treated as disposable income. I sat alone at that tasting table for a few minutes, looking out at the beautiful garden ceremony space through the window. The one Brooke had picked out months ago without ever once asking how it would be paid for. Sandra came back and sat across from me. For what it's worth, that took a lot of guts. It took 15 years of practice not having any, honestly. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was significant, but not in the way my mother had threatened. Word got around in our extended family, the way it always does, and most of them once they heard the actual details. The forged contract, the identity theft, the head table comment, were not exactly sympathetic to my mother and sister. My Aunt Carol called me directly and said, "Olivia, I've watched your mother treat you like a backup plan your whole life. I'm honestly relieved someone finally drew a line." Brooke and Connor ended up booking a much smaller, much more modest venue, paid for this time entirely by themselves, with no input or contribution from me, which honestly, looking back, is exactly how it should have been from the start. My mother didn't speak to me for almost 2 months. When she finally did call, it wasn't an apology. Not really, it was more of a quiet, deflated acknowledgement that things had gotten out of hand, which, from her, was about as close to accountability as I was ever going to get. I told her I was open to rebuilding our relationship, but only on the condition that it would be an actual relationship, not a financial arrangement disguised as a family bond. She's been better, not perfect, but better. Brooke and I are still rebuilding slowly, mostly through small, careful gestures instead of big conversations, which honestly feels healthier than anything we had before. As for Hayes Ridge Holdings, I still hold that mortgage note. The Wentworth estate is doing better now under tighter financial oversight. And ironically, Richard Wentworth and I now have a genuinely respectful business relationship, built on the most unusual foundation a lender and borrower have probably ever had. I think about that tasting table a lot. The moment my mother's face changed when she realized that the daughter she'd spent 15 years treating as an endless resource had quietly become the one person with actual leverage over the thing she wanted most. Here's what I want you to take away from this story, if you take away nothing else. Being the responsible one doesn't mean you owe everyone else your stability. Being patient for 15 years doesn't mean you're obligated to be patient forever. And the people who treat your boundaries as inconveniences will absolutely treat your money the same way, given the chance, because to them, you were never a person with limits. You were a resource with a pulse. I didn't buy that venue's debt out of cruelty. I bought it because for the first time in my entire life, I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was overdue. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever been the family bank account instead of the family member, I want you to know, it is never too late to close that account. Thank you for watching, and if you believe in quiet, calculated karma over loud, messy revenge, make sure you're subscribed because there are a lot more stories like this one still to come.